Rolling sound.
Sound speeds.
Rolling cameras.
You want to do a hand clap? Sorry.
Welcome to No Homo, No Hetero, a panel discussion on what it means to be Black, bisexual, and male in the United States. My name is Kelsey Minor, and I'll be your host and moderator today. When seeking answers to questions regarding healthy identity, development, and overcoming multiple intersecting oppressions, Black bisexual men have very few options. In 2014, J. Christopher Neal, founder of FluidBiDesign, organized MenKind. His intention was to create a monthly discussion and support group for sexually fluid men of African descent, which is in its third year in providing this needed resource. Today, we will explore the impact and challenges of this particular work with a panel of MenKind organizers, members, supporters, and allies. Now, if you're using Twitter and want to share your thoughts, use the hashtag #NoHomo_NoHetero. Again, that's hashtag #NoHomo_NoHetero. There are community advocates, educators, and everyday bisexual people looking forward to talking with you. So let me introduce the panel right now. We have J. Christopher Neal sitting right here to my left. Visual artist, educator, and proud native son of Detroit, J. Chris Neal is founder of FluidBiDesign, organizer and facilitator of MenKind, a support group in advocacy for fluid men of African descent. To my right, we have Dennis Sumlin, an award-winning speaker and self-mastery coach. He works with college-ready students, entrepreneurs, and other go-getters to communicate effectively, build confidence, and maintain a positive mindset. He has been part of MenKind for 3 years and assists with promotion. Dennis is currently developing his speaking business so he can deliver his message of self-confidence and overcoming internal challenges to the masses. To the far left, we have Norman Green. He was born and raised in Harlem. He is a father of 3, former educator, and proud member of the same loving gender community. Norman is 73 years old. Let's start with J. Chris Neal. Talk to me about starting this organization and the motive behind it.
Well, the motivation was really to, as you already said, to really create a community of support for bi-identified men of African descent. As a bi-identified man of African descent, I felt that I had very few outlets. Needless to say, as the cliche goes, with gay folks, I was confused and afraid to be gay. With straight folks, I just didn't know what I wanted, or I was or worse, sort of a predatory sexual person who was just out trying to get everything and be greedy. So I knew there had to be other men out there like me who were trying to live this life in a duality, live with that duality and have both women and men in their lives. So I wanted to create a space where we could come together and talk about that, but also talk about manhood, masculinity, and myth. You know, all these things about what it means to be a man, how we define ourselves, how we see ourselves in the world, and what our contributions can be.
Okay. And Norman, you are, let's just say, a man of a certain age. Talk to us about your experiences and what you've gotten from this group.
It would be too long to go into, but unfortunately, I got involved in it through sexual abuse, first by a woman and then by a man. I was only 12, so I spent most of my life going back and forth. There allowed 3 children. I have always been comfortable going back and forth. And primarily was due to my sexual abuse. What I found out as I got older is the changing world we live in. And then understanding that I am a Black man and I represent others. And my concern is making sure that I represent them in a positive, fulfilling way.
And Dennis, talk to us about your experiences, and you do outreach work with college age students. How do you take your own experiences onto them?
Well, first, my experience as a bisexual man, I was bisexual my entire life, and I actually started out pretty open. I had to learn to be in the closet. I started out open. I really wasn't taught a lot of anti-bisexual attitudes. I didn't know that you had to be in the closet until I got a little older. I started to see that people weren't responding well when you would say, I'm bisexual. You know, other boys / young men would question your manhood if you did that, and women didn't like it. So I learned that I had to keep that under wraps, and it became very kind of a little lonely there, because then I'd find other people who were bisexual and they were in the same situation. They either had girlfriends and they were on the DL, or they couldn't tell anybody. So, I went from not ever being in the closet to having to learn to go there. And staying there, I felt like isolated, where could I find other bisexual Black men that are like me and that need support and need a network? And I used to roll around in my head to create a group like that, but I never did it. You just sit. It's an idea. It's in the back of your mind. It's not a really big, huge priority. You got other things going on in your life. So, but it's been in the back of my head. And then all of a sudden, one day, I went to another bisexual group, and there was Chris talking about this new group for bisexual Black men, and I probably knocked him over, running over to him after the meeting, because that is something that I think is critically important for the bisexual Black male community, to have a group where you can go to and feel totally comfortable with talking about everything that you have been going through the past, in your lifetime. And there's not really a place like it. You would think, living in New York, you would think there's a group for that. You would think there's multiple groups for that, but there's not. There's only this one at this time. And so being part of this group, it was very healing for me. In fact, the first couple of meetings, I actually felt physically being healed, And so since then, it's been, I've had to readdress my own issues of being in the closet and how I felt about my own bisexuality. So the group was a great thing, and it did reintroduce some issues I had to look at myself. As far as my work is concerned, I'm actually not out when it comes to the work I do. So my clients and classrooms and stuff I teach, I really don't address any bisexual issues in that, in my career. Usually it is around, some of my clients do work around confidence and self-esteem and so forth, but really bisexuality doesn't really come up in my career. But this is definitely a great asset. It's definitely been something that I was looking for, and I needed to address those issues that I had.
Okay, Dennis touched on a number of key points that I want to bring up, and let's start with you, Chris. When you, bisexual people, do you feel like you have to live in an internal closet? Is it something that comes up with people in your everyday conversation, and how do you deal with that?
So my story is a little, maybe I can't call it unique, but I grew up with artists. My mother was sang opera music, my father's a painter. I grew up in an arts family, so I grew up in a pretty free environment. So there were people of other orientations around all the time. I mean, as a little kid, I just thought it was funny, but I mean, it wasn't anything that was weird. So when I had my first experience with a guy, the first person I told was my mom, because I just knew that I didn't know where it was going to lead. And I felt like if the gay club burned down, and I didn't want my mom out there to be like, oh, my son would have never been up in there. I wanted to be like, just come get my body because I'm up in the gay club. So I didn't want her to be aware. Plus, on the real tip, I had met a lot of gay men who had no family. Like they could not go home to their families. So they had family within the community, but they were not accepted in their families. I wanted to make sure if anything happened, I could go home. So I came out of a very open environment. So I've been relatively open about it from the very beginning, particularly with my lady friends, because I just believe in being an informed shopper. So like you need to know what you're getting. And I usually have the conversation really early on because it protects my heart too. Like before I get all involved with you, we just let you know what's going on here so you can either reject or accept at this moment. So for me, the experience of being in the closet has not been that intense, except in work when I was working with white folks in nonprofit. I do youth development work. So I was a little less willing to be open when doing projects with the Department of Education and stuff like that. But now I work for another organization where part of my introduction is I'm a cisgender, bi-identified man of African descent. That's the first thing I say. And I want the young men in the room to know to put that picture together, to put the image, the visual thing that they see before them with that image together and be like, oh shit, or oh snap, or whatever it is, and all that. So
Norman, in your experience, when you have this conversation with people, what's been the reaction? How do you go about talking about this with someone?
Well, first of all, when I started dealing sexually, we were dealing with segregation. And everything was a no-no. Everything was in the closet. Basically, because I was the only male in two entire generations, I was looked upon as the man of the house, which meant that the role I played was important, not only for the family, but I represented all the Black men at that particular point. Upon having my sexual abuse be paramount in my development, I found that in most cases, I didn't deal with my peers. Most of the people I were in contact with older, because I was always told that a child should be seen and not heard. So I was privileged to be in the company of adults quite frequently because I did not open my mouth. In the passing of me growing first, I was also raised in a very culturally aware, a relaxation of. I later found out that my mother was same gender loving, but my grandmother was offered the lead in the original Porgy and Bess. I fortunately have a beautiful voice, and I was elected to sing in all city chorus in New York City, which started my career in show business, which exposed me to all kinds of sexuality. It's quite well-rounded for me. And I felt that I never was able to answer my sexual abuse until I began to deal with the crisis of HIV and AIDS. When I had a lot of the brothers who I used to deal with who were bisexual. Some of them I knew their wives and children, been in their homes and stuff like that, and they're concerned about their sexuality and finding a place to be. I had a meeting once a month in my apartment. It was called Club for a New Attitude, because at that time, Patti LaBelle had a record out, New Attitude. That's when it started. And we would meet once a month concerning our sexuality and our concern for HIV and AIDS. I was glad that I was able to be able to do that for the brothers, and it made me feel the importance of what we should attempt to do for each other. My primary concern is that, for the most part, I hate to say this, but it's the truth for me, is that we don't love each other enough to look beyond those sexual things that we engage in. And I, at 73, still indeed deal with sexuality, and I have to constantly reflect on, especially the younger men who approach me, dealing with the fact that they say, well, what's wrong with you? And I've said, there's nothing wrong with you. It's that you have to understand that you're not only a sexual being, but a man. And you should be proud of the fact that you're a black man who didn't necessarily come here the same way the rest of the folks came here, and should learn as much as you possibly can for all those things that you have to deal with, not only being a man, but being a man who may be inclusive with your sexuality.
So a number of other points were brought up, and I want to bring it back to the organization, the group, and the things that you guys talk about. When you have your meetings, are you addressing sexual abuse? Are you addressing HIV/AIDS? Are you talking about these things when you have your meetings or when you get together with your groups?
Yeah, we're addressing all of it. So I mean, we call a program season, which starts in September, goes with all through June, and then there's a strategy team of about 6 or 7 brothers who come together, and we talk about what the topics are going to be for the year. We have a couple of open days, but we've dealt with everything from this year was actually a stellar year. We had 2 conversations with trans men and trans women. So by identified men in conversation with trans women, by identified men in conversation with trans men. We've talked about mental health. We've talked about a number of different issues. We try to keep the conversation. It's a black men's group in which we deal with our sexuality. So we talk about what it means to be men of color in America. So that's everything. That's politics. That's race. That's police brutality. And then we also respond to what's happening in the world. So in 2015, when there was a shooting down there every week, we paused our program meeting and we had conversations about those things. So it's really about providing what's needed in the moment. And then what's coming from the group, because it's not, if anybody in the group brings something up and that conversation goes that way, then we go that way. So we can be talking philosophy. We also just talk about sex, quite often. So it's like, it's a wide-ranging group. The ideal is to have a safe space, or I should say a brave space, where we can be ourselves and be authentically open and share.
Dennis, you mentioned earlier that when you heard about the group, it was sort of like it was a healing and awakening for you. Tell us a little more about that experience and what you felt in your inner body being a part of this group.
Well, like I said earlier, that I was originally started out not in the closet, and I learned to stay in the closet. So before finding this group, I was in the closet, learned behavior, and because I didn't want to have people, because if you say that you're bisexual or anything other than heterosexual, automatically they start questioning your very manhood. I mean, it's not enough that they think that you're. They just start questioning your manhood and just your worth as a man just because you happen to like the same gender. So all that stuff and just kept me in. So the healing process with this group was, one, it's powerful after having to be in the closet, after having to pick and choose who I told and pick and choose what I said to who, when, and why. To be in a room full of other black men who are like me, who have the same desires I do, and who have been questioned like I have, and knows what it's like and how it feels, and be able to talk about that openly and get support about it openly, and to be able to openly declare that I'm a bisexual man, which I don't get to do in my other parts of my life. The process is real, and so that was the beginning for me, to be able to sit in the room with other black bisexual men, powerful, being able to talk about sex and sexuality, masculinity, and how it relates to being bisexual openly, without second guessing my words. That's powerful. At the end of the group meeting, we all gather around and give each other a group hug, an individual hug, as a show of support, men being affectionate with each other. but it's non-sexual, which of course is sometimes not allowed. You know, you can't hug your male friends. You have to be very wary about what you do when you're not, you know. So being able to show affection and camaraderie with other men, very powerful. And so those things, when you're able to do them with no shame, no guilt, being open with other people in a supportive atmosphere, it's a very powerful thing.
Let's talk about bringing the conversation to masculinity now and having to, quote unquote, defend your masculinity when you are dealing with whomever you're dealing with. What is that like, and how, let's look forward to solutions. How do we change the narrative to trying to define what masculinity is? And we'll start with you.
As well as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd skip over.
It's fluid as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
I was involved in gay men of African descent. I met Charles Angel years ago when I was involved in show business, and through that, this illustrious gentleman next to me came to GMAT, and that was my first encounter with knowing that there was such a thing as a group for bisexual men. I have always been concerned about my masculinity because not only am I a Black man and looked upon, but I'm also a father. I also have a lot of adopted sons women who don't have, sons who don't have fathers. And the role that is masculine is based upon, so I say, America's focus on what is masculine and what is feminine. If you go to other places in the world, it's a different approach to what is masculine. But living here and the maximizing on the fact of what it's supposed to mean in the community in which you live, it can be rewarding as well as dangerous because how people look upon Black men. And it is paramount for us men who can flow throughout our community and be able to sit down and communicate on many levels, the opportunity for those who are coming up behind us, the opportunity to get a better outlook on what the fluidness of what a man can be, and not based upon what the American public sees it as.
You know, when you were asking earlier about the closet piece, you know, the closet, which is a term I don't really use, is like a multifaceted kind of thing. You can be out of it at one point in some ways and not out of it in other ways. So like you can be out at work and social, but in your mind still have this kind of thing that where you frame yourself that's tight. In terms of masculinity is concerned, like I mean, I always have all the markers that all the indicators of, like, you know, straightness. I'm 230-pound dude, I'm athletic, all these kind of things, you know, like just a lot of the other kinds of markers. And I have always had girlfriends. But what I noticed that whenever those relationships falter, I would immediately go to some deficit in my masculinity with the women of it. So there was still this thing inside of me that questioned my manhood, because in the back of my head, and we joke about this in the group all the time, is like, you know, if women have a bisexual experience in college, it's like, oh, I just had this experience, it was just fun. Among men, you suck a dick, you gay. Period. Like among many people. Like it doesn't make you, whatever, there's no conversation, there's no nuance, you suck a dick, you gay. So there was this conversation in the back of my mind around the fact that as long as things were going well and I was able to flow, it was cool. If there was any kind of disruption in that, then I would default to, well, it's because I'm somehow not this real man kind of thing, and I still need to achieve that. And it was in my head. It was a conversation in my head. It was not something I experienced in the streets, never an experience with other people. It was the way I kept myself boxed, or in a quote unquote closet. That makes sense.
Absolutely. And Dennis, do you want to add anything to the conversation of masculinity?
Sure, I believe that masculinity is one of those things that you feel on the inside. When you start talking about labels and definitions, that gets a little hairy because the definitions are narrow and ignorant and so forth. But internally speaking, I think that if you have a masculine nature, you feel it on the inside, whether you can describe it or not. So, that's pretty much how I felt my whole life as far as the masculine energy inside of my soul, inside of my spirit. But when you live your life and you start dropping this bisexual label, and people think that you're less than manly or less than masculine just because of that, it's like it's sometimes you hear so much noise from society and so much noise from everybody, you tend to forget yourself. And so even though I feel what I feel internally, spiritually, after a whole bunch of labeling and just because there's a lot of women who don't like bisexual men either. They think that you're less than manly if you bend over or if you suck big or if you whatever. So getting it from all ends, you can forget yourself sometimes. You can get distracted by society's messages and feel a little bit like, well, maybe I am lacking something because that's how people are responding to me.
So how do you bring that back to yourself, and how do you shut out that noise to help you understand who you are?
Well, first of all, you have to get centered. You have to block out all the stereotypes and all the noise you're hearing, because everybody is repeating learned behavior. So they don't even know what they're talking about. So once you get clarity on the fact that the people who are calling you names, the people who are demonizing you, they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about because they're repeating learned behavior. Once you get an education on all that stuff, it leaves you the space to refocus, center yourself, feel your own feelings, maybe do a little meditation. Also, be around supportive people who reinforce who you are, people who maybe are in the same situation as you. Like I referred to earlier, being in a group, especially in the first couple of meetings, was healing. So be around supportive networks. So there's a whole lot of ways that you can recenter yourself and remind yourself of who you are, and realize that when these people throw labels at you and define you in these narrow ways, that they actually don't know what they're saying. And some of them who are labeling you could be the same thing, and they're just projecting. So all those things you keep in mind in order to center yourself. That works for me.
Chris, Dennis talked about finding a support group. Let's talk about the group a little bit more now, and what's been some of the challenges of doing this, and have you seen the growth since you started the group?
So it's a support kind of community. So it has a drop-in tendency to it. So there's a core membership, I would say, of people that come. That's about maybe 10 or 11 people. It's been bigger at times. It's been smaller at times. But the challenge is what Dennis was saying before about sort of like being on the DL. Most brothers who are working with bisexuality are not out about that. There's no bisexual club. There's no bisexual bar. There's no bisexual restaurant. So where do you go and find folks? I mean, what I've learned recently is that, oftentimes in queer spaces like Afropunk, different spaces like that, you'll find more people who are fluid, who are fluid in their sexuality and their gender. But it's hard finding the group and knowing where to market to. That's one of the biggest challenges. Other than that, I don't see many challenges to it, other than just really trying to get the word out as much as possible. I'm very, very pro fluidity. But I think there are more fluid people in the world than straight people and gay people. So I just think they just haven't been told, they haven't had a conversation yet, and know that it's possible to live in that world, live in a world that has everything you want. They don't think that. So,
what's the long-term goal for this, and then we'll wrap it up?
Well, I want to keep. Well, MenKind will continue to be to serve as the resource of his community, and will continue to do things to market and grow that. We're going to start next year working with podcasts and maybe even doing some of this kind of thing, streaming. So because we have people on our webpage on our Facebook page who are in Trinidad and different places. So we have a lot of people who are involved or are away from New York and they want to be involved. So we're going to try to make the meetings available. FluidBiDesign is the large organization, and FluidBiDesign is responsible for what we want to do is be in the promotion, be in the business of promoting fluidity and the Homo, Hetero, things like this, promoting these kinds of ideas, and generally broadening the idea of what manhood and masculinity can be.
All right, I want to thank Norman Green, Dennis Sumlin, and J. Christopher Neal for talking with me about this very important topic. Thank you guys very much. And remember, if you're watching us on the web, remember to use the hashtag #NoHomo, #NoHetero, and tweet about it. Talk about it on Twitter, get it out, and join the conversation. And also, we may take some questions from you guys online. You're watching the stream at the end of this. So keep those questions coming. If you have questions, if you want to know more about the panelists that are sitting here today, of course, let us know about that. And I'm going to keep drilling at you this hashtag #NoHomo, #NoHetero. Remember, if you're on Twitter, tweet us. You can tweet me, the Kelsey Minor. You can tweet any of us here if you want to join this conversation. All right. So we're gonna switch gears here.
We cut recording. We're still live streaming. Hey y'all, hope y'all enjoying it.
Yes. All the people you don't see behind the scenes here, they're making sure we're good on this. Chris, are you still here? Do you know what?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for your water.
Say hello, folks.
What up?
What will happen during these little intermission breaks? How do I know if people are talking? Can I see them in some way? If they're interacting?
You can't right now?
Yeah.
All right, and the next.
Oh, yeah.
We sure
For a minute in between. Yeah.
Who's sitting where?
Which article folding is
He's sitting there.
I have shorts, so if we can start ridiculous. Well, you got shoes on? Not under here. They're not gonna have skin tone, right? Not it's weird. I just want to make it the second year. Yeah. I like JT can have each other. I'm fine. I'm good. I love her.
We pause the live.
Really? And then you just pop back in? That's smart. I really like this.
Say hello.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
That. It's perfect. It is perfect. I need to. But
Actually, can y'all go and get this?
Oh, okay. Hurry.
Who's the next person?
Jessica. Yeah. My job is to.
Kelsey, can you okay, just look at the camera for a second?
Don't blink.
Yeah, like.
Stop laughing.
Kathy, come here. Come with me. These, or like, yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna take it.
That's another one. Okay, you can blink for like a hot second, because you gotta look at me.
Okay.
We are recording on this, so just so you're always aware.
Oh,
So-
wow.
All right, one second.
Okay, you. Great.
Yes, you're good.
Thank you.
Okay. No problem. Take the label off the wood.
Okay.
Can I get him a mug, actually?
All
Do you
right.
have them?
Yeah.
Let me grab it. Good stuff, though. That was so good.
Yeah. Pause. Sorry. Pause.
Turkey, you like?
Yeah, just stretching out the bones. It's not. No, you want to be, if you're straight behind it.
Excuse me. Wait, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
No, no, it's okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Oh, you know.
Maybe like
Yeah.
I think this, this is fine. I think as long as the bubble is in the thick.
It's like, if
you know what I mean?
Really, there's one, but
But it's like that when you're looking at the star, you know, like you close one eye, just like
good. Perspective, girl.
relax.
But I'm thinking with the lens, it would make more sense. It's like, yeah, you know? Because that's where the lens is. Well, I am more writer than writer. So, exactly. I'm gonna expand my repertoire.
You ready, Jesse? Almost. I'm ready.
Do you want me to say
It's a wrap. It's a wrap.
Oh, all of the raps? Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Okay, sound is ready.
Hey, I don't want to waste food.
Yeah. Ready? Okay. Ready, Kelsey?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Roll sound,
Sound speaks.
roll cameras.
Camera rolling.
And welcome back to the No Homo, No Hetero panel discussion on what it means to be Black, bisexual, and male in the United States. Again, I'm your host, Kelsey Minor, and I just want to push you over to Twitter. If you're tweeting about us, use the hashtag No Homo, No Hetero. Now we're back for the second part of this discussion where we talk about lovers and allies. And to my right is Jesse Parker. Jesse is the co-organizer of MenKind. He is a commercial operations manager at Nielsen's Connection. That's Nielsen's Ratings, if you know a little bit about that. He is also a graphic design artist and social events coordinator. To my left, we have Andre Walker. He's a former dancer with the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. He is currently an activist in the LGBT community, combating mental health and depression, as well as addiction. Andre is also a spoken word writer and dancer. He works with an organization empowering women and young girls. It is called Hey There, Beautiful. Okay, guys, let's talk a little bit. And first, let's start with Jesse. Jesse, we're the co-organizer of MenKind. We talked a little bit about that in the last panel. Talk about your experiences with the organization.
Sure, it's been a great experience. It actually all started in terms of supporting Chris at the time. We were involved, and he had this idea of creating a space for bisexual men, fluid men, graphic design. And at that time, it was something completely new to me. I didn't know what to expect of being a part of this group, but I really liked the message that he was positioning out there. And so I decided to create a logo that will represent the group well. So that's how I became the co-organizer and the graphic design artist for MenKind. And I really didn't think I would be part of the group. I actually thought I was being in support. But I ended up being in the conversation because it actually helped my transitioning in terms of me being an openly homosexual man in America. So it really helped me open the door for you to be here live. So it definitely helped me in that.
What I love about these conversations is something comes up. I, as the moderator, had no idea that you and Chris were even involved. Now this lovers and allies title makes so much sense. And Andre is here as well to talk about his experiences with dating bisexual men. So now that that's out there, I think people who are watching really just want to talk about that in particular. So tell us, Andre, let's start with you about your history of dating bisexual men.
My history. Can I rearrange that a little bit?
Sure.
Is that fine? Let's talk about my present. So, wow. This is the part. Okay. So actually, I'm currently married and getting divorced from a guy who identifies as bisexual. And recently, my issues around battling addiction in the community is because I am recovering from crystal meth addiction. And inside of that, I am seeing a relationship coach / therapist because I have developed some intimacy issues around that. And so the question recently came up about, or in therapy, like, why do you like bisexual guys? And I never really even realized that until I was having a conversation with David. He asked me to do this, and I was kind of like, have I ever even told you that? And he said, yeah. Go around saying, walking up to men and going, hey, are you bi? You know what I mean? But I was sitting at a dinner table last week. A lot of my friends were saying, well, you like them because they're unavailable, or they're unclear, or they don't know what they want. And I was like, yo, really? So then, like, I got phone calls afterwards. You know, I always want to tell you that you just keep picking the wrong guy. You know, you always pick these guys. And then I got pissed off, and I was like, well, how about I actually pick them? Because maybe you never said, I'm unclear, or I don't know what I want, or I'm unsure, because usually I'm the one breaking up with them, or friend zoning them, because I'm afraid, and I have intimacy issues. So, and then it hit me, it's not just, so my history or my experience around it is like, they're ostracized, right? Ostracized because they're bi. They're not being unavailable. They're not bi. Being bi doesn't make them unavailable or unclear or not know what they want. They're just bisexual. No one ever stops to look at themselves. You know what I mean? No one ever stops to say, hey, I chose the down low guy. You know what I mean? What am I up to, right? How am I objectifying them? We love to put it back out on them and not make it an us conversation. And so I could talk about my history forever, right? Like being involved in gangs and sleeping with a lot of the gang members, because I was left home at a pretty early age. You know, Alvin and all that other stuff came along, and that was great. It saved me. But those men who were bi in those gangs who I was having secret relationships with, they were my protectors after growing up and being a child of abuse and living in an abusive household. From the time I was 6 to I was 17. And those bi men took care of me. Those bi men, yeah, they taught me the ways of the streets too, and I did a little selling for them, but they taught me a work ethic that stuck with me. Those bi men, like, I didn't know how to connect with men in an intimate way without, or being a friend until I met David. I had to relearn that. You know, I was just actually telling him I'm special. His friendship is to me because I had to reteach myself that. And here I go. There's a bi man who is clearly available and not unavailable. So I don't think so much history is so much important to the present and where I'm at. That was it.
So Andre keeps referencing someone named David.
Oh, sorry.
You'll
My
meet
bad.
him in the next panel.
Hashtag no homo, no hetero.
Jesse, talk to me about, I'm going to get a little personal with you, especially now that I know that you and Chris had a relationship. Talk to me about meeting him and him having a conversation with you about being bisexual and your processing of that.
Sure. For starters, well, to go back a little bit. So prior to meeting Chris, I had been involved with bisexual men here and there. And my experience has always been them being pretty much authentic, sharing their experiences, letting me know what the situation is, if they're still involved with the women, if they have interest in women. So I don't really fit well with the stereotypes that I hear out there about bisexual men, in terms of promiscuity and that sort of thing. But what was always cloudy for me was long term. Like, how can I put this situation, this relationship in a long term status? It was always cloudy in that perspective. So leading up to that, when I met with Chris, it was always an authentic conversation. And he shared that with me. And he shared about this group. And that's actually one of the big reasons why I wanted to be a part of the group, was because here I saw someone that I can actually see long-term or a relationship with. And I felt like it was my responsibility to understand him better, act with myself in the community. Because one thing that I stress so much, and it hurts me to also say, is that the LGBT community is so broken. Unfortunately, that's just what it is. We fit in this umbrella, but we don't understand each other. We're very much misunderstood. I hear so much stereotyping about, I even get the left eye with my friends or associates or colleagues where they're like, well, now that's gonna last. And I swear there's bets out there, but but it's unfortunate because that's how we see each other. We, you know, in terms of like, if, for the gay brothers and sisters, they'll probably look at it like, well, I don't see why you'd be involved with a bisexual person. They seem like they're on the down low. They probably have a hidden agenda. They're not. I'm sure they're not being honest. And then from bisexual men, there's some, or women, some of them are also thinking, well, I don't want to be associated with gay because I'm nowhere near that. I want to be as close to as possible being straight. So there's always this underlying story that needs to be raised. And me having working in media and market research, this is the reason why I want to be a part of this, because we're being misrepresented. There is a large group of people out there that are being stereotyped for the wrong reason. And I just feel like that conversation where we mend those lines needs to be had. So I hope that I will be that voice. So yeah, to tie it off with Chris, this is why I'm very happy to be part of MenKind, very happy to be part of his life in that sense, because I'm being exposed to people in areas that need to hear this. And they need to basically cut the shit and be authentic and be vulnerable and hear out for them. Sure.
How do you guys move past what I guess your friends have to say about the bisexual man that you may be dating, or in your case, the man you separated from, he's bisexual as well. How do you move past all of that noise?
I trying to stay on my business.
Yeah.
You know what? I honestly don't have an answer for that other than like, people attach to a story. And I think it's like with any relationship, right? So in their minds, because they know he now has a girlfriend who's pregnant and we're getting a divorce, they go for that story. But they don't want to attach to, which is, well, they want to hear, no, they don't want to hear me, right? They don't want to hear me. That actually we both were in addiction together and it is responsible for me to separate them, right? They're more attached to the drama. Mm-hmm. So those people that get really attached to that drama, I have to have them go. That's the answer for me. Because if you don't go, not to say that I believe in violence, but, you know, it would take me there. So you got to go. Because you clearly are in my life for that drama. But then there are people, the people that really support me, right? Because I got to be accountable for me. Inside of that, you can support me. I like you, you're being responsible for yourself. This has nothing to do with sexuality. This is a relationship issue. This is an intimacy issue. You know what I mean? It's a couple issue. People grow apart all the time. It's not a bisexual issue. It's a people issue.
Do you have reservations at any point, like you are entering into this relationship with this man who likes both men and women, are attracted to both men and women? Is there any doubt or reservation ever when you're entering that relationship?
Well, I'll be lying if I said I didn't have any reservations with whomever. It doesn't necessarily be a bisexual person, just whomever, right? So yes, I've had my reservations, but that is something that it all depends on the communication aspect of your relationship. And again, when I had my relationship with Chris, it was always authentic at the beginning. I knew what the situation was, so I had to make a choice. Was that choice easy? Of course not. But when you love someone, you are willing to take that risk. And I did it. And I'm glad I did, because it really helped me become the person I am today. It helped me with my trust issues that I had in the past. And overall, it just made me feel like I guess I felt like much better of a person, because I am being open to something. I'm being accepting, and I'm living that truth. So I just hope that I'm an example for others out there for that. If it's not for you, then it's not for you, but I would not judge before actually trying it out.
What I will ask you guys is, from your perspective, misconceptions about bisexual men or bisexual women in that sense. Misconceptions through your lens. What are some of the misconceptions that people make?
Well, I guess the misconception that they may have, of course, the availability aspect, the honesty, and because it's there, it's there. I think it's more so who you're being involved with. It's more that, like you were saying, Andre was saying how it's more of a person issue, it's not so much a sexuality. So I feel like it's unfair that they're using that as a tick when it's reality. If you put a mirror on their face, maybe traits about themselves. So I think that's one of the two misconceptions.
In your eyes, misconceptions?
The misconception is that hetero is the larger population. I really believe that. I could walk down my block and walk back to 3 phone numbers of Keisha's boyfriend, Tanika's, Sandra's, and I'm not saying that, you know what I mean? Like, it's just the misconception. Like, I actually think about, at one point in time, my godson's father had an issue with me being around him a lot. He was telling one of my best friends, like, he's gonna make him gay. And she was like, I think we're all born bisexual. And then through socialization and psychological things, a child picks one or the other at some point. And that's just that. And I was like, yo, that makes sense. Because it's like, again, I do not walk outside with a fucking crystal ball and like, oh, this guy's bi, let me go towards him. You know what I mean? Like, it's there for all. I think there's a fluidity to it. I think you're right. Like, there's a fluidity to it. And the misperception is that they're not there, that they're liars, that they're unavailable, that they don't know how to connect and they don't know how to be intimate, because actually that's not true.
In you guys' experiences, what about monogamy? Is there concern that I'm with you today or tomorrow I may get to feeling another way? Like, talk to me about that.
I mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I'm gonna laugh with this topic because monogamy and non-monogamy. Okay, so yes, that does exist, and it's very much something that is pointed out when you're involved with someone who's fluid, sexually fluid at that. But I laugh and I joke with that because I always say, well, the gag is even whether you're gay, straight, whatever, if they don't tell you, doesn't mean they're not doing it. You know what I'm saying? So I don't understand when they say that. So for me, I feel like it always boils down to what kind of individual you are. Understand yourself first, and then understand what kind of relationship you're getting yourself involved in. So for me, whether you're monogamous or non-monogamous, it doesn't really matter, for at least for me, because I'm more concerned about the connection and love of what it is, what the relationship is. If it's not for me, then I'll save it then. But if it is for me, then I'm signing up to it, and I'm going to put my all into that. So again, those doubts and those kind of worries does not really affect me. However, it was a little bit of an interesting experience in the beginning where if I'm walking alongside with my lover, it will be times when a woman will pass by and they'll go all in discussing about the woman. And I'll just feel like, okay, you said that a couple times, but you know, it's no different than when I hang out with my buddies. They're like, oh, that dude over there. So it's the same thing. So I just feel like it comes down to what you feel comfortable with, I guess.
I just, from my personal reason, like well, first of all, let me say this. I like wearing black today. Tomorrow I might like wearing red, right? The same way people fall in love, sometimes things are for a reason, for a season. I will say that. And you never know, even in the commitment to be monogamous, just like we fall in love, sometimes we fall out of it. And that's been my experience so far. And again, that's not attached to sexuality. It's really people, you know, but when we want to like put judgment around bias and things, we will judge it. But for me personally, like I'm not built for a polyamorous or polygamous relationship. Just like somebody reveals like, hey, I'm bi, I get to reveal that too going into a relationship. So honestly, that it's a conversation as far as I'm concerned. And if I sign up with somebody, because I've done this before, I signed up with somebody that said, hey, I'm in an open relationship. I was like, all right, I'm gonna go for the ride and see what happens. That shit sailed for me. And I tried this, it sailed twice. It is not something I'm interested in capturing in me, but that's me. You know what I mean? And I get to be like honest with who I'm dealing with, just like they get to be honest with me. That's it.
Jesse, you're involved with MenKind. How has the organization, the group, influenced your perspective on bisexuality or being sexually fluid?
Well, for starters, it And it basically was a mirror in terms of my own life because I felt like I was just put in a box. So, for example, growing up, I was involved with women all the way up to college, senior year of college. And I was in a relationship with my girlfriend at the time, in and out for 4 years throughout college, to the point that it was getting to a point that I wanted to be serious. Like, I want to marry her, you know? But there was always this underlying thing where I had interest in guys, but I never practiced it. I thought it was just something internal. I would beat myself up. And I had no allies, and it was not with my friends or family about this. So it was hard. And I also grew up in a West Indian, family. So you already know how that goes. If you don't, you will. But it's one of those things where it's like you just don't want to be out about it. So at one point, I just dared myself. And I was like, all right, well, these feelings are getting really strong. And unfortunately, I didn't have a group like MenKind where I can discuss this with brothers and sisters. So for me, I just had to figure it out, and I got it, and I stepped out, and I found out it was the right thing for me. And I'm glad I did that at the time because when we had our fallout with my girlfriend relationship, I knew that this was something I had to understand first because I didn't want to be a brother in the street that's on the DL or not being authentic in the relationship. So I felt like I had to put myself out there and see if this is something that I would want to be. And that's how I found myself out, through that experience. And I'm hoping that MenKind will open that for many brothers out there that are in that space, where they're still trying to figure it out, but they're in a mask, whether they're in a closet, whatever you want to call it, that they could find a place where they can meet people like myself or people that are not. But yeah, they can understand.
Andre, you're not involved in the organization, but you do your own work in different organizations. But in hearing what MenKind is all about, do you see the importance or realize the importance of a group like this?
Yes, definitely. I was actually thinking about that earlier. I had a friend who was married for 10 years or so, and her husband left her for another man. And like I thought she was gonna hate anybody that had anything to do with anything that was not of the hetero quote, right? So all she wished is that he had a place to like articulate what was going on with him. So like he could have been honest with her. Same thing in my marriage, like again, although he was honest, I wish now I know about this, like there's a place, it's kind of like Al-Anon, right? Like I need a place to be like, yo, wow, he's like living this dream now with somebody else versus me. How do I not be angry or judge myself because I might feel stupid? Because it does come up every now and then. And I have to remind myself, oh, you were the one that said I'm going, right? But because I can't go back and control the situation, then it becomes bad, even for me. So that's why I think it's important. Because it's talking about it, it's doing, not shit, sorry. I did just say that. It's doing something like this where you're informing people and no one's hiding. I'm not hiding my experience. No one's making me feel ashamed of it. Whereas my own friends the other night and just a little bit like, like it's out in the open. It's not done in the dark. There's a light to it. It's been shed on it. Like these things are going on. Bisexual people are here and like they're loved, And honestly, I really believe in like in some of the research I've done, there's a majority that history wants to like much like people of African descent. You want to roll your tank right on over that.
So in listening to your history, it seems like a number of the relationships that you've had been with bisexual men.
Mm-hmm.
And your soon-to-be ex-husband, bisexual. Do you find that, I guess you're drawn in that direction? You spoke a little bit about this earlier, but have you had relationships outside of bisexual men?
Yeah, two. They were awful. And that's not because they were like gay, like they're straight gay. I'm straight. Call it gay norm. I don't know what LGBTQI is going on. But That's fine. Like, and that's the thing, like, I'm in a question with that right now. Because it's not, again, it's not like I run out and say, yay, pick me.
Yeah.
Or yay, I'm picking you. I find that it's happened, like, I had a few friends who it's just regular, just hanging out, buddy. Next thing you know, hey, I never told you this. Okay. Because love can look a whole lot of ways, right? And I'm not talking about hookup right now. It can look a whole lot of ways. Maybe I'm gonna say this guy actually told me that. Like, he was like, you ever notice you have a lot of straight friends, guy friends, and you do gay friends? And I was like, no. He's like, because men need a place to lay your feelings. And I was like, oh. And I didn't like it with this part of it. Like he said, you come with a lot of feminine energy, but you don't come with any judgment. I don't have to do this to get your attention, you know, or to get something from you. So maybe that's it. I don't know. Like, men just need a place to lay their feelings sometimes. And like when we put all these labels on them, granted, labels how you know not to swallow poison, but they also keep us away from love, keeping accepting people. I don't know about that. That's a question, but
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. You touched on a lot there, which I could segue into something else, but I want to ask Jesse the same question. Are you currently in a relationship now? Is he bisexual? Like, talk a little bit about your own personal experiences with that.
Sure. So yeah, I'm still involved with Chris, and I mean, in terms of like what, like how our relationship is set up, or
Yeah.
okay, well, I mean, it's as it's always been a relationship where we understand one another, what we want. We've had a discussion of what we wanted, whether it want to be open, whether we want to have it closed. So in terms of those conversations that we had, we settled on a decision on what we want to move forward, and it's been moving forward. We've been together for now 3 years. And of course, again, thankfully with MenKind, it was a nice place for us to buffer out those feelings that we had, whether he had his perception about me and I had my perception about him. So it's been pretty much tranquil in that sense. And I think I'm learning a whole lot in this relationship than any other relationship I've been in, to be honest with you, because of that. Because you're talking about two completely different designed men. Okay, sexuality, age, character, how we grew up, and we found a common place. And it's because of those communications. So if you asked me this question 3 years ago, I'd probably been like, first of all, that's not who I would want to go to. I don't even know if I want to even be identified with someone who's sexually fluid. I don't even know what that is. But so it was something that I had to go get involved, understand, and now I can say I can move forward in a relationship.
So it's safe to say that you have learned a lot.
Yes, I've learned a lot, and all good and bad. And I think that in terms of just having a relationship, period, because I've had the relationship before with men, gay and bi, and to be honest with you, when I look back, did I learn anything from that? I don't think so, because it was a lot of like, I don't know. I guess we couldn't find that common place. We weren't completely authentic. So it was really weird to be involved with someone who was just like, in the beginning, like, because I remember I said it to him. I was like, listen, this is really cool, we're hanging out and everything, but I'm trying to be clean here. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm trying to be clean, I'm not doing this one. And I remember he took that in and came back with me. It was like, all right, well, this is the situation. And at the time, we did the open relationship thing. He's like, you can be my man. I want you to be my man. But you know I got a woman. And I remember when he gave me that pill, I was like, whoa, okay, what am I about to do here? They were like, don't even answer me right now. I'm like, think about it. And I had to think about it because it was so personal and tapped into something that I was getting a little nerdy, a little angry, like, can't believe you put me in this position. But then at the same time, I was like, you don't have to do it. I put my guard down. I was like, you don't have to do it. And, you know, push come to shove, I gave it a try. Did it fail? Failed on that sense. But we had that commonality that regardless if we're going to have a relationship or not, I could still see him as a friend. I could still see him eye to eye. We could still have these conversations. So again, it comes down to the umbrella of like when folks look at people that are bisexual, they look at like, oh, they're inauthentic, they're this, they're deceiving, they're this. That's all crud. Because even if my situation didn't work out, we still have that mutual respect. We have that brotherhood.
Just jotted that down. I'm trying to be claimed. I'm gonna use that this weekend on somebody and see if it works.
I be claimed.
So we have a little bit more time left. Let's talk about how you guys see bisexuality moving forward, what people can learn from the settings like this and the conversations that we're having today on your list.
I was gonna ask you that.
We can let Jesse go first.
He's swallowing water. Okay, for starters, I mean, there's a lot of questions out there. People are probably in a relationship right now, or probably they're seeing someone or considering someone. I think these platforms help us have those conversations. And you might be someone that thinks like you. So I think this is really important. I'm really happy that we're having this space because of that. And particularly with Black everything. I'm always a supporter of Black community, Black love in any shape or form. So I'm really happy about this because if there's any doubts, question, this is your opportunity to figure it out. Is it for you? If it's not for you? And if it is for you, or you're willing to give it a try, like be reasonable and be rational and figure out yourself first. And when you figure it out, everything will go in place.
Okay. Well, we're gonna have to leave it there. I want to thank Jesse Parker and Andre Walker for joining me in this conversation. Thank you guys so much. And if you're still tuning in with us on the stream, make sure that you go to Twitter and use the hashtag No Homo, No Hetero. There we can meet with other advocates and educators and everyday bisexual people who are ready to have a conversation with you. So again, the hashtag No Homo, No Hetero. Thank you guys very much. This was great. Okay, so we touched on a lot there, guys, in that conversation. So remember, if you're still watching us on stream, go to Twitter. In fact, I'm going to tweet right now. And join the conversations with you guys.
You go ahead.
Yeah. What part of the episode?
Okay, so that's this interview.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, so
Yeah. I don't know. I slept last night. So Kelsey has awareness. So
It is.
yeah, whatever. Whatever we're out.
Awesome.
Okay, David's hanging at you? Yeah.
Good. I think I'm that. I'm like unofficial diagnosed, but I'm like. And I look over here. I'm just trying to meditate. Oh, yeah, wait, right. I'm like in yoga for meditation. I can't. Are you tired? You want to switch? Yeah. You don't yeah. Okay.
I believe you're sitting in the chair.
Yeah, so you literally interact. You just have to just check in or still recording and stuff like that.
So today, the muscle stations have everybody else, so I'm on to
That's cute. That's cute. Everything. What am I including?
I feel like yeah, like y'all really gonna do this? Y'all gonna just steal Snapchat's whole thing?
I know. It's all existence.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, I guess I could see the appeal because it's just like you can have like the day within 1 hour. I don't have to go and do the snap story and also I have to see else. Right. And I'm just right now too.
It's not a logo. I actually.
Tracy wanted to try out that camera so I can tell you your signals. Tracy wanted to try out that camera.
You want to switch?
Yes, what are the best signals?
One in one shot, two shot.
Okay.
And your mic.
You know.
Ready? I'm ready now. AC on. You need more water, Phil? Yeah, you need more water. All right. Light on set. Rolling sound. Sound speeds. Camera rolling.
All right, and welcome back to No Homo, No Hetero, a panel discussion on what it means to be Black, bisexual, and male in the United States. Again, I'm your host, Kelsey Minor. Let me introduce this panel. We're talking with the millennials now, the young bi boys, as we'll call them. No, but to the far left, we have Anthony Gomez. He serves as Programs and Partnership Coordinator at the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporic Art. He is now a project analyst at the Rockefeller Foundation. Next to Anthony is J.R. Youssef. I got that right? You got it right. Is a Nigerian-American native New Yorker who is an actor and the author of The Other F Word, Forgiveness. His short story, Face to Face, is also published in Best Buy Short Stories. And to my right is David J. Court. He is an actor, writer, and producer. Most notably, he is the creator of the hit web series By the Web Series. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out because it's good. Thanks, Kelsey. All right, guys, let's talk about your experiences a little bit. And first, let's just give people a little taste. And Anthony, we'll start with you. About who you are and when you're coming out by story.
So I'm Anthony. I guess I realized I was bisexual, or I used the phrase fluid, maybe in high school. That was the earliest point. I didn't really start acting and expressing that with people until I got to college. I've always been the guy that was sort of floating between spaces. So people naturally assume, whether it was from the prints that I wore or just how vocal I was about speaking my mind, that I wasn't necessarily like everyone else or the other guys on my college campus. But when it comes to coming out, I told my mom back in high school. I feel like that's really the only coming out story that I had. And I literally sat her down and said, hey, I have had sex and I don't really date. Maybe that's a whole other story in itself, but I've had sex with both men and women. See myself continuing to do so. I'm telling you because my dad has explicitly said not to tell him. So I'm letting you know this. You can share with whoever you want. But other than that, I've never felt a need to come out and announce certain things to other people. I connect with people on a regular basis, but when it comes up, I say I'm fluid, I'm queer, but it also depends on which space I'm in. So being in the South, I don't really talk about it, but when I'm up here in New York, that's when I use phrases like fluid, queer, depending on the background of the person that I'm with. So.
All right. And yeah. So in terms of actual attraction, I remember in pre-K, I had a big ass crush on the prettiest girl in the class, and she had like really nice braids and bobos in her hair, and I also had a crush on the cutest boy in the class, and he was like super fresh in Jordans and stuff like that. So I guess that means that I'm kind of vain when it comes to attraction. I look for the people who are well dressed and well groomed. So
we also discovered things about ourselves.
Yeah, right. So that's kind of like one of the earliest memories I remember having. And I also remember that those attractions felt very different for me. So the one to the little boy kind of, I don't want to say it confused me, but it felt very different than my crush on the little girl. So as I got older, just kind of like looking back retrospectively, I was like, oh no, that was attraction too. It just feels different for me to be attracted to a girl versus a guy. So, yeah.
I know this story a little bit, but everybody watching this not. So share it with us.
I mean, for me, I think I really discovered my bisexuality in high school. I came out to my mother at a very, early age, maybe 16 or 17. Started experimenting around that time as well. I didn't come out like fully until I released the web series. I think releasing the web series for me was not only me using an opportunity to share my unique experience, but it was also for me to come to terms with my identity and who I was. And it was my way of boldly saying, this is who I am, deal with it.
Okay. Anthony, you said you were from the South?
Yes.
Where?
I'm South Carolina.
Okay. Kindred spirit here. Not South Carolina, but somewhere down there. Somewhere. Yeah. Talk about, let's start with you and being from the South and all the things that come with that. And bisexuality, sexually fluid. It's not something that you hear about in the South a lot. So just talk about some of the challenges there and some of the things you probably face.
I can't really think of major challenges because I didn't really explore. Mind you, I had a lot of sex in South Carolina, but I wasn't like as open about the sex I was having until I came to New York. But while in South Carolina, I think most of my experiences dealt with perceptions. Of either things that I was thinking that were being perceived or actual things that were being told or said to me regarding my sexual experience or my sexual attraction to other people. So I guess because of the spaces I moved in, I didn't have to face challenges head on. I knew they existed, and because of that, I operated throughout the space in silence. But I can't, nothing comes to mind when I think of challenges in South Carolina. The culture is different, and that's maybe due to the lack of access to knowledge of the LGBT spectrum. My mom, she got it. Like when I told her, my dad, he also understands, but he doesn't want to entertain anything under the umbrella. And I'm also about, I like to use my energy as best I can. I'm not about wasting my time. So because of that, I didn't entertain anything of the sort of process. Maybe in retrospect, maybe I could have done things differently, but I can't think of challenges.
You don't talk to your father about you or people that you date or see. You don't have that conversation.
So he knows about, I guess, my female partners. But again, I don't date. So like for the past year, I've been with one woman, off and on, but on for the past 3 years. He has met her. We talked about her. But I remember in high school, we had a twisted like the birds and the bees conversation. And in that, he was like, I don't know what to do, but if you ever do want to interact with a guy, don't tell me. Or don't make this known. So in addition to us not having a relationship like separate from that, I saw no reason to tell him anything outside of what he requested to know.
David, let's come to you before I go to JR because he's a native New Yorker and I want to talk a little bit about that too when I ask the question. But let's go to you because you were born in the Midwest.
Right.
And talk to me about the challenges there, if there were any. Indianapolis, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's progressive kind of city in its own way. But did you face any challenges?
I kind of have a similar story to Anthony, actually. As far as my father goes, we don't really have that conversation as far as my male partners. He knows all of my female partners. He knows I've had male partners, but we don't really have that conversation. And I don't know. I think it's just something that is just easier to pass over or ignore than to really embrace. But my mom, she's great. She's been very open, very supportive. There's not much of a community when I was there coming down. So I didn't have anyone I could talk to. If there was a community, they were older people, and if they were older, they were trying to advantage me. So I really wasn't about that. But as far as Indiana goes, having a support system there was very, very, very small. And to the point, even kind of now. I recently was planning my 10-year reunion for high school, and one of my fellow classmates had an issue with me planning it because I was a half faggot. Yeah, so whatever. I don't really care. But yeah, so I think being here in New York has definitely helped me find my own rhythm a little bit more than the rhythm I could have found.
Perfect segue to the New Yorker, because when I think about New York, it's a huge melting pot of a lot of different people, a lot of different experiences. If there is some hate, it's pockets over here or whatnot. So growing up here, bisexual, any challenges?
Growing up, I grew up in Queens. My family, I was first born in Southside Jamaica, Queens, and then when I was about 6 or 7, we moved to Far Rockaway, Queens. So growing up, first of all, we were the only Africans on the block, and back then it's not cool to be anything other than African American. So there were challenges to that regard, and beyond that, in my house, it was kind of like little Nigeria in my home. You know what I mean? So like when we would leave the house, it was, Queens, whatever. But in my house, it was little Nigeria. Are definitely cultural challenges, if you know anything about Nigeria, and then outlawing the practice of, I think they call it sodomy still, or homosexuality, any sort of same-sex interactions are illegal and punishable by law, and some places death, and etc. So that can just kind of give you an idea of the sort of culture I was sort of brought up in. And then when you tack that on to actually going out to school and going to school with predominantly African American people, that's a whole nother hurdle too, as far as homosexuality and bisexuality is concerned. So that was my melting pot growing up. And so for like a lot of years, I was very confused about my attraction to men and women, or boys and girls back then. And growing up, it was kind of inconceivable for you to be attracted to men and women. It was like, no, like David, you're a faggot. Like you're either you're gay or you're straight, and you already admitted to being attracted to boys, so you're gay. That's really what it is. So those are some of the challenges that I faced growing up. However, I did discover, like, if I went to the West Village or if I went to Manhattan, I could sort of get away from my problems. I did have that escape, and I did have that getaway. I knew that as long as I'm in the city, I feel fine. Like whenever I go to Manhattan, I feel cool. I feel better. I feel like nobody's judging me from my little switch or from the clothes that I have on or from anything like that. I knew that that was like a sort of safe haven. So being like 13 and 14 and stuff like that, I knew I could like have that sort of getaway and go to that place. So yeah.
Are you, Anthony and David had conversations with their mom about their lives?
Yeah.
So not so much their fathers.
Yeah.
Is that your second series?
I think it's fair to say in most Nigerian households, they just pretend like sex doesn't exist. And you oftentimes don't get the birds and the bees talk. So I've never gotten birds and the bees talk from my mom or my dad. And I've never talked to them about relationships growing up whatsoever. I just had to kind of figure it out on my own. I would say a couple years ago, maybe like 2 years ago, me and my mom first started talking about like relationships and men and women, but I still don't feel comfortable talking to her about relationships, even though she is completely supportive of my bisexuality and completely supportive, just kind of in general. It's new terrain. We've never talked about this stuff before, you know what I mean? And my dad and I, we don't really have a very close relationship. So once again, I just don't feel comfortable talking to him about men I'm seeing or women I'm seeing or anybody I'm seeing, you know. So.
When I think about millennials, I think a very carefree, well, depending on where in the year you were born, millennial. If you're closer to 82, then your thinking may be a little limited. If you're further down, you're a little carefree, you understand. And then the generation after millennials, it's just, we're all here. So talk to me about being a millennial, being in the bisexual or fluid space. Anthony, I want to say the words that you like. Talk to me about being in those spaces and some of the things that you've seen either change or shift throughout time in those spaces. And let's start with David.
Oh, okay. I mean, for me, with releasing my web series, that's been my main exposure to meeting different people that can accept or reject. But I think what's been great has been the response that I've gotten and how a lot of people want to learn more and how people are more open to it and how people can relate to it more. And I think the conversation is shifting to, dare I say, almost like a kind of like a converting kind of thing, where people want to experiment and they want to see, like, oh, this is the thing. Maybe I should want to try it out. I almost want to say that it's kind of becoming a fad, or it's kind of becoming expected, because even in like major media, we're seeing more like fluid characters, and we're seeing more people having open talks about it. We're seeing young actors that are coming out as bisexual. So I think that because of this kind of progressive movement that the millennial mindset has kind of placed on society right now, it's a very open time to fully express yourself. And I think that's really great.
Anthony, let's talk to you about that.
Sorry, you mentioned the bisexual space. I'm like, where is it?
Okay.
So MenKind, FluidBiDesign is definitely like, so when I moved to New York, I first learned and found MenKind. So that was like my starting point. That's when I realized that Black people and Black men are bisexual, and then also that multiple types of relationships exist. But I would say a lot of my comfort, security, or exposure has come from being within the Black Brooklyn art scene. For the queer Black women scene, because with that, it's just been a lot of trying to find the best way to explain it, but I just felt home in those spaces, or like accepted, like where we acknowledge the differences that are there, but just with access to that space comes connections to other spaces that I didn't even know exist. So, not to go too deep, but like the fact that there are a whole different tribes of like black queer friends that just go off and have orgies and cabanas, like that's something I never even thought would be accessible for someone like me. But since coming here, that's like a daily thing. So, you know, like that's a whole another web chat. The fact that it exists is not just like a figment that's been in my imagination. It's been something that I don't take lightly, and I understand that I get that. I'm privileged enough to get that because I'm within the Black Brooklyn space and that I live in New York. It's not something that I would be able to. I'm sure that it does exist in South Carolina, but it's not readily accessible or available for me if I still live there.
Can I ask that? Sure. I mean, I feel like what I would, Anthony kind of mentioned something that I felt that I should kind of express a little bit as well. Though these spaces, that I was speaking about, like in the media per se, are there, it's still not a lot of us in it. Like you can see like a white dude like kind of get by, or you can see like an Asian chick get by, or you can see like a Latina chick get by, or like a Latina dude get by. That spot is still not welcome for us. And that is something that I would like to change, but it's just not there yet.
JR, I'm gonna let you start this with like, what are some of the social and cultural resources that you need personally as a young Black bisexual man?
Okay, so I definitely think that there should be a hub or a book or a space or something like that that sort of tackles bi specific issues. Everything from things like how to approach a man versus a woman versus a agender person romantically, and how those things are different because they're not the same. To things like sexual harassment at work because people know that you're bi, or whether they know you're bi or not. to being mislabeled as gay or straight, to, I don't know, sexual health things too, specific to bi men. Like, that is such an untapped sort of space, and my younger bi self would have benefited from that so dramatically. Also things like, what are some sort of positives and sort of negative to dating a man versus a woman and things like that. I don't know, like really in-depth bi-specific things. That would be amazing.
Okay. And with that, JR, you got the last word. Again, thanks to JR Yusuf, Anthony Gomez, and David J. Court for joining me for this young bi millennial conversation, this part of the conversation. Again, I want to thank you for joining us on this panel. We want to also thank the host, the Center for Culture, Sexuality, and Spirituality, FluidBiDesign, Bias Entertainment. This event was provided with the generous support of BiNet USA, the Faith Fund, and the National Black Justice Coalition. In addition to this live stream and YouTube video, this event is part of a forthcoming documentary called No Homo, No Hetero. And again, it will examine what it means to be Black, bisexual, and male in the United States. Again, still tweet with us. The hashtag is No Homo, No Hetero. Again, thank everybody who was a part of the panel. I'm your host and moderator, Kelsey Minor.
Yeah. Cut camera.